All right, guys, we are off and running here doing my one and only NFBKC for this season. Apologies if we're kind of up against it with the stream here. I was on the radio just up until 9 p.m. Central, but underway. We got Jokic, Embiid, Halliburton, Tatum off the board with the first four picks. I am picking ninth for the record, so I'm not sure if I can highlight that on the shared screen, but regardless, I'm in the 9 slot. Didn't have a major preference. In fantasy hoops, there's to me a pretty big advantage to picking first, assuming Nikola Jokic is going to continue being the player that he's been. You contrast that to fantasy football, where there's always somebody. Last year it was Jonathan Taylor. This year it was typically Justin Jefferson. But there's not often a massive gap, between the number one pick and then the guys that go 2 and 3. Whereas with Jokic, there's been that just kind of wild combination of massive upside, durability, and just year over year statistical output. So okay, picking from the 9 slot. We'll see how this thing goes, and I will answer any questions in the chat. For anybody following along on Twitter or on YouTube, we implore you to like, subscribe to the brand new RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube page as we grow that throughout this season. All right. All right, we're taking Anthony Davis. I almost always avoid Anthony Davis, at least I have in years past, but I do feel like, for one, there's a huge advantage to getting the forward center eligible players. NFBKC tends to be pretty strict as far as position eligibility goes. If you're doing drafts on other platforms, you'll see a lot of guys are guard / forward, shooting guard / small forward. Obviously, there are some forward / center eligible players here, Davis being one of them. But there's you won't see any guard / forward, so that's something you got to keep in mind in these leagues. And getting somebody that I can slot into either that forward or center spot on any given week, that was a goal of mine going into this draft. My good pal Alex Barutha, who heads up our NBA coverage, he did his draft last week, and that was the number one thing he passed along was make sure you're not locked in positionally, because you have an injury, you have a 2-game week for somebody, and all of a sudden you're in these positions where due to the positional eligibility rigidity, you're starting a objectively worse player just because you can't fit them into your lineup. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that has absolutely happened to me in the past. All right. Trae Young off the board. That was certainly somebody I considered at that pick. I think there is kind of this strange disconnect between Trae Young's real life value and his fantasy value. I mean, he has been rock solid in terms of fantasy throughout his career, and I think if there's one thing he can improve on, it's something that he's already done, which is higher volume from three. It's kind of been every other year from him. He's had years where he's been north of 3 made threes per game. Last year was much lower than that. I think if that bounces back in a Roto league, he's going to end up being really valuable. So I like the Trae Young pick there. We're moving a little faster now. KD at 11, Jaren Jackson at 12. Would not have minded him making it back around to me. Towns goes 13. Wow. Okay. But as you can see there, that's somebody in Towns who has that dual center forward eligibility. So extra valuable again in this format. All right. So Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, LaMelo Ball, I'd be okay really with either of those at this point. Sabonis, I would consider, but I think there might be a little overlap there with Anthony Davis. Not somebody who's going to help me out in terms of free throw percentage. Davis is 80, low 80s kind of at best. Sabonis, not really a shot blocker, more of a points rebounds guy. Obviously a good passer for a big man, but we'll see where we go here with the 15th pick before I'm back up. All right, and there goes Sabonis. So let's see. We got Mitchell, we got Edwards, we got LaMelo Ball. I mean, upside wise, LaMelo has got to be the guy. Mitchell feels safer. Hmm. All right, let's do it. We're going LaMelo. We're going LaMelo. That gets us some threes. That gets us, in theory, plenty of assists as well. Obviously the main concern right now with LaMelo is, for me, it's more like team context. Like I think his role is obviously safe, and depending on how this Charlotte Hornets season goes, I don't think they're going to be very good. I don't really worry about him, losing minutes or sitting out games towards the end of the year, maybe at the very end. But he played 36 games a year ago, and he played 51 as a rookie. Kind of felt like he just kept running into that same ankle foot issue time after time, but in the 36 games LaMelo played, I mean, 23 points, 6.5 boards. He's a great rebounder for a point guard. Underrated source of steals. You think of the assists, you think of the threes, but 1.3 steals per game last season. Field goal percentage is the concern, of course. 41.1. That was a career low last year. Actually, had his highest career field goal percentage as a rookie, which is pretty rare for any guard. But we'll hope for some improvement there. Either way, we'll take a LaMelo Ball, Anthony Davis start. Kyrie going in the middle of round two. Look, I get it. I totally get it with Kyrie. One of the best per game players there is. Basically, would be a lock. Top 10 pick if you could guarantee that he would be there, be engaged, play 60 plus games even. But just not a player I really want to chance it on at this point. I do think there's going to be situationally. I think he's in a good spot. I mean, Dallas is ridiculously top heavy, and I don't really think that's a good thing. I think it's one thing if you're a team like Boston and it's like, all right, your top 5 or 6 guys are kind of carrying everything, but it's really two in Dallas, and I think that's going to result in fantastic production per game. But I think with Kyrie, I'm not really too worried about the off the court stuff. I know that's been the prevailing narrative over the last couple of years. My hope is that is just kind of behind him at this point. We will see, but injuries to me are the far bigger concern at this point. Even going back to his Cleveland days, has never really been a guy who has consistently played even 68 to 70 games. And with the way stars operate now, it almost feels like if you get to 70, 72, that's the equivalent of 5-6 years ago playing close to 82. Donovan Mitchell goes off the board. McCall Bridges, like Bridges a lot. I think he's kind of the type of guy right now that might be a better fantasy player than a real life player, which is relatively rare. So we're seeing him go towards the middle end of round two. Darius Garland, Devin Booker, and there goes Wembanyama, 23rd overall. I'm starting to buy in on Wembanyama, man. Earlier in draft season, I was doing a bunch of mocks and doing best balls, and you're seeing people grab them all over the place, and it's easier to do that. I think in a lower stakes, especially in a best ball when there's just not a ton on the line. But man, I think he has looked like a completely different player to me in the preseason than even summer league. And thought he looked relatively shaky in summer league. Of course, you saw what you needed to see to prove that he was worth the hype. But he looks bigger. He looks more confident. His ball handling to me looks a little bit tighter in the preseason. You still worry about the games played, but I'm pretty convinced at this point that he's going to be a per game monster. And Alex and I have kind of tossed around the idea of throwing in a ticket on him to win not only Rookie of the Year but Defensive Player of the Year. I don't think it would be a value bet, not one that I would necessarily recommend. But I think you can see that narrative emerging. Like if we're 2 months into the year and he's blocking 3.5 shots per game, which I think is well within the realm of possibility, that could emerge. So De'Aaron Fox goes to end round two. Paul George to begin round three. We got to start looking at who we want to go with here. I'd be fine with Desmond Bane. Cade Cunningham to me, maybe Lauri Markkanen if he's there. DeJounte Murray is always interesting. Kind of a strange fantasy profile in some ways, but shoots a good percentage. Hits a decent number of threes. Not a lead in that category by any means, but the steals are what we're after there. Good, not great free throw shooter. And it's been a very good rebounder at times throughout his career. Was elite in that category by guard standards during his days with the San Antonio Spurs. dropped down from 8.3 rebounds per game in 2021 down to 5.3 last year. I think that's a byproduct of kind of playing alongside guys like Clint Capella, but we'll see when that decision has to be made, and now it does. Let's see. Thinking about Markkanen, thinking about Siakam. I do love taking Siakam. I think we're going Markkanen. I think we're going Lauri Markkanen. We're taking Markkanen. There we go. All right, so we're starting off Anthony Davis, LaMelo Ball, Lauri Markkanen. We'll take that. And you will notice here that the NFBKC does do third round reversal. So picking 9th overall, then coming back around for the traditional snake in round 2. And then, as you can see on the screen there, starting back, going in reverse order in round 3. Nice little benefit, if you're picking toward the later end. I think with the advantage that Nikola Jokic has given you the last few years, it actually matters because there is that drop off in terms of reliability. I know, per game, Embiid certainly closed the gap last season, but a couple of years ago, Jokic was basically lapping the field. So nice to bump up a few spots in round 3 and start with a little bit of balance. Right, we got a center eligible player in Anthony Davis, who we can also start at forward. We got a forward in Markkanen, and then our guard in LaMelo Ball. With Markkanen, he's been an elite fantasy player for 1 year. He's been a very vanilla, if not wildly disappointing fantasy player for the first 5 or 6 years of his career in Chicago, and then I don't even remember him playing for Cleveland. That just seems like it didn't happen. I know he played and started 61 games, was playing a ton of minutes there, but that just felt like a lost year for him in some ways. And then just exploded onto the scene last year, almost 26 a game, almost 9 rebounds, close to a 2 assist player. Hopefully that bumps up a little bit this season. The one thing with Markkanen is he doesn't really give you much defensively, which is tough for a guy who, basically starts at the 4 for the Utah Jazz, but offsets that with great percentages. I mean, he was almost 50% from the field last year, despite taking almost 8 threes a game, which is wild. And he's been 86, 87% at the line for most of his career. So we feel good about that, pairing those percentages, trying to offset that field goal percentage for LaMelo Ball, and hopefully giving ourselves a nice blocks foundation with Anthony Davis to start. So after Markkanen, Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, Jamal Murray, and DeJounte Murray going with back-to-back picks in the middle of the 3rd round. Also trying to keep a close eye on this Vikings 49ers game. Need a little bit more out of Brandon Ayuk. Jalen Brunson. Okay, Jalen Brunson coming off the board with the 33rd pick. I'm very, very poor when it comes to math, like trying to count backwards on these, but I believe that's 33rd for Jalen Brunson. There goes Miles Turner. Always love Miles Turner. I feel like I've been burned. Every year I've taken him has been like the year that he misses, 28 games with like a random foot injury. But no real problem there. And I believe he is forward/center eligible. So that's big as well. Jordan Poole going 35th. Obviously had the 41 points in 3 quarters the other night. Jumping ADP a little bit there, but nothing too crazy. I get it with Poole. I mean, this could be like an all-time good stats, bad team season. Maybe the best good stats, bad team season that we've ever seen from Jordan Poole. I feel like this is like the perfect player in the perfect situation for him to just go off every single night. Efficiency wise, I have some questions as to what that's going to look like. I have some questions as to how many wins that's going to result in for the Washington Wizards, but not sure they or Jordan Poole, for that matter, really care about that. And then to round out round 3, Fred VanVleet. I wouldn't say I'm fully avoiding Fred VanVleet, but I think we do have to look at him differently this season. No question about that. Kind of just a weird dynamic in Houston. I'm very intrigued by this team, and I think they have the perfect coach to kind of get these guys in line. And look, I think dropping Kevin Porter, like that was a net positive for a number of reasons for this team. For one, it eliminates some of the logjam at guard. I was kind of curious as to how that was going to play out, but that situation, I guess, took care of itself. VanVleet is still going to play a ton of minutes. He's still, to me, going to have a similar stat profile to what we've been used to, over the course of his career in Toronto. But I think you know, you could argue that it's a downgrade in overall talent from what he had around him, but there's more mouths to feed, right? Like Houston's trying to accomplish two things at once. You're bringing in a win now piece on paper in Fred VanVleet, another one in Dylan Brooks. You paid them both good money. And you also are trying to develop Jalen Green. You're trying to develop Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün. I mean, you have a lot of mouths to feed. Tari Eason's going to be back in the mix at some point as well. So I don't know that any of that really comes at the expense of minutes for Fred VanVleet, but I'm curious to see how this plays out. And I certainly don't view it as a positive for his fantasy value. And I don't know that many people do. All right, so Chet Holmgren off the board to begin round 4. We're now back to just traditional snake the rest of the way. Third round reversal only applies to that round. Love Chet Holmgren. Absolutely love him. Been enamored with him for a while. Obviously, it was a letdown that he wasn't able to play last year. I think he's looked fantastic. Always going to worry about a big man, with foot issues early in his career. So games played, could be something to monitor. But OKC so badly needs a center. And I do still think like Taj Gibson got waived today. It's like that might be a Taj Gibson spot. Like they need somebody like that, a body like that on this team. Because I think they're still deficient as far as like guarding some of the true big men in the NBA, but they basically just ignored center for the last 3 or 4 years. And I think it's going a little bit like understated just how big of an upgrade Chet Holmgren is going to be from some of the essential G leaguers that they've been throwing out there. Porzingis goes at 37, then Tyrese Maxey, love that, at 38, Evan Mobley, and then Zach LaVine. James Harden, by the way, still on the board. His ADP sunk down to 30 over the last couple of days at the NFBKC. It's closer to 40. I did actually take him at pick 40 in a draft earlier today. Lower stakes, kind of a home league type of setup. So I felt a little more comfortable taking that chance. I don't know in this format if I want to be the one to take him. I don't think I'll do it in round 4. If he's still there in round 5, that's a consideration we'll have to make. I don't think we're looking at James Harden, necessarily sitting out the season. I mean, if there's one player who would do it, it might be him. But I think some things are going to come to a head here. Whether he's out there for opening night or not, which looks unlikely at this point. There's that 30-day deadline where something has to give, and I think ultimately James Harden is not going to leave money and potential free agency on the table. So it could be a wait with him through the first month of the season, but if you're getting him, in the 40s or even the 50s in some drafts, I think that eventually pays off. Let's see. Yeah, LeBron's still on the board as well. DeMar DeRozan just goes. Nikola Vucevic goes. Let's see what we should do here. Thinking maybe Walker Kessler, maybe Pascal Siakam. I like a lot of the names still on the board here. Pascal Siakam, I mean, I got to consider LeBron at this point. I mean, missed games are obviously a huge part of the equation for him. Siakam, not quite so much. Let's see. Do we really want to pair Anthony Davis with LeBron? I think we do. At this point in the draft, we're 45 picks in. I mean, LeBron's ADP is 39.6 in the NFBKC. Siakam 32. Siakam feels a little bit safer to me in terms of games played. We're going to go Siakam here. All right, we like that. Siakam and Markkanen have been two of my pet players so far this season. I have a lot of Markkanen. Got him in an auction draft that we did with RotoWire a couple of weeks ago, and got him at a pretty reasonable price. One of those is a keeper format. Another auction, I think I paid like $24 for him in a $150 budget. And then Siakam is just not the type of guy who has round 1 or even round 2 upside, but if you're getting him in the 40s in the draft, I think he's really done nothing but return value on that throughout his career. Appreciate you guys jumping in the stream. Kevin, this is a Roto League. So it is just 8 category Roto, no turnovers. Pretty standard, from there on out. I was saying at the top, the position eligibility tends to be pretty rigid. So that's something you have to consider in this format. That's really the only quirk, I would say. But other than that, obviously you're getting sharp rooms here. You're never feeling like you get great value, but just is an 8 category Roto League. So LeBron goes 1 pick after Siakam, as expected. I think both of those guys were lingering out there a little bit too long. Harden still on the board. I'll try to get an updated ADP for him, just isolate, as many drafts as we can over the last couple of days and kind of let you know exactly where he's been going. NFBKC has a fantastic ADP page, by the way. RotoWire does as well. But this one, you can isolate certain dates and see, where was this player going from October 1st to October 7th? Where is he going over the last 2 days? Harden. So let's see. If we just look at the last, okay, what? This is NFL. I don't know what we're doing here. All right, we got to get back to basketball. This is making just great live content. Meanwhile, Harden does come off the board. So he goes with the second to last pick in round 11. That would be 47 overall, if I'm counting correctly. Brandon Ingram goes 48. And then Anthony Simons, somebody I was actually hoping would be on the board. He goes with the first pick in round 5. Talk about Jordan Poole having a potential all-time, bad team, good stats season. I think Simons could be in that boat as well. All right, so let's get a look. I think we're on the right page for Harden's ADP now. So there have been 11 drafts that have gone off basically in like the last 36 hours, and Harden is going on average about pick 42 overall in those. So about in line. I mean, he went a little bit later here, pick 47, but some warranted skepticism, I think, on when he's going to play. But whether that ends up being for the Clippers or the Sixers or for somebody else, I do think he's going to be out there. Maybe he takes it to that full 30 days, but he's not leaving free agency on the table, in my opinion. All right, Nick Claxton comes off the board. So we're looking at Walker Kessler or potentially Julius Randle. And again, for Randle, it's not that I love the player all that much, but he is forward and center eligible. Being able to interchange there is pretty big. With Kessler, we're looking at blocks. Pairing him with Anthony Davis would be massive there. Rebounds should take a step forward this season in year 2. 72% from the field last season. That's big as well. Let's see. Well, Kessler or Randle. I mean, they're going back to back in terms of ADP. This is somewhat of a toss up, but we went with Siakam. Kind of a similar stat profile to Randle in a lot of ways. We're going to go Walker Kessler. I don't have a ton of him so far this year. I want to get some Walker Kessler shares. So through 5 rounds, we like how we started here, picking from the 9 spot. Anthony Davis, LaMelo Ball, Pascal Siakam, and Walker Kessler are our first 5 picks. So a little bit, heavily slanted toward the big men, toward the forwards. But marketing, gives us plenty of threes. Anthony Davis, Darvin Ham said he wants him shooting 6 threes a game. So we will see about that. I'm not super confident that Anthony Davis is going to regain that shooting stroke that really hasn't been there since the bubble. It's been all over the place. He was one of the worst, least efficient shooters in the NBA last season. But we'll have to make some hay here in terms of looking for some points, looking for a few more 3-pointers. LaMelo Ball should help us quite a bit there. You're getting kind of average contributions from Pascal Siakam in terms of threes. Lauri Markkanen well above average in that category, so we like that. But the thing you have to keep in mind, I think, with threes too, especially over the last few years, is like everybody's shooting more threes, right? So guys who were kind of average or above average earlier in their careers. Siakam gave you over 2 threes a game a few years ago, but a lot of players are giving you 2 threes a game now. So that's not quite as valuable. And his production in that category has also waned over the last couple of seasons. But I'm in on Siakam. I think there is some risk that he's traded at some point. I do think that Toronto is going to be one of those teams. Like they're like the Tennessee Titans, if you follow football. Where it's like they're coming into this year, they didn't totally blow it up. They brought in like Dennis Schroeder, and you're like, okay, what's going on here? And in general, I think they're a team that I could see kind of going either way. And my lean would be that they could end up being a seller. All right, so Şengün comes off the board. DeAndre Ayton, Kawhi Leonard. We saw Drew Holiday just after my first pick. Let's see what else here. Kawhi Leonard. Didn't realize he was still in the player pool. He goes in round 5. I mean, Kawhi, just been down this road, a few too many times with him. It is what it is. Like I love the player. He's probably my, one of my top 3 favorite players to watch in the NBA, but he's a 55 game guy at this point, and I don't see why that would reverse, as he gets deeper into his career. Kevin asked, are we doing a punt assist build? I'll be honest, that was not necessarily the goal here. And because I have LaMelo Ball, that would kind of go against that. Somebody who could conceivably lead the league in assists. But yeah, I mean, obviously, Lauri Markkanen's not giving you much there. If he gets to 3.5, we'll be thrilled with that. Anthony Davis, not much of an assist guy. Kessler doesn't give you really anything there at all. Siakam was close to 6 assists per game last season, and I do think that can increase. With the absence of Fred VanVleet, we'll see how much they put Scotty Barnes, in a ball handling role. The Schroeder thing is just wild. It's like I guess they're just going to go forward with Dennis Schroeder at point guard, but I do think Siakam, we're looking at a baseline hopefully of like 5.5 assists. So, to answer your question, I wouldn't say I'm intentionally punting assists, but we'll see where we end up going in round 6 here. That might have to be something to consider going forward. But we feel okay about the squad. That's for sure. I've come out of some of these drafts feeling great. I've come out of others feeling terribly. And, more than anything, it's dependent on health, of course, but we'll take the start so far. So Scotty Barnes goes with the 4th to last pick in round 5. It's 56 overall. Franz Wagner, 57. Randall goes at 58. We did consider taking him earlier in this round. I like that value quite a bit. Banchero goes to round out round 5. With Banchero, to me, still somebody that's probably a little more valuable in a points league. I think the shooting will come around for sure. I think his end of season shooting numbers looked a little bit worse. He had that stretch, I think was it February, where he hit like 1-3 the entire month. I think that was dragging things down. Like he's not going to be a sub 30% 3-point shooter again this season. But free throw percentage is something that he's going to have to prove. Like was not a good free throw shooter at Duke. Was under 75% last season. So that's something he's going to improve on. But he could be looking at 25, 7, 4.5 assists, 1 steal. So no problem taking Banchero there. Rudy Gobert, baby. First pick of round 6. I feel like I'm kind of hanging out on Gobert Island. Like let me be clear. I'm not going to jump ADP in almost any situation to get Rudy Gobert on my squad. But I also think last season was the absolute baseline. People are talking about him like he's 35 years old. Like he's still in his low 30s. Was he like 31? Absolute worst case is he kind of repeats last year. He's been really healthy as far as like 7'2" big men go throughout his career. He's been 70, 72 games most years. I look at it as kind of a minor bounce back situation. Like I don't think he's going to go back to being like a 2nd, 3rd round value or anything like that. But I also think there's a pretty good chance he gets closer to 2 blocks. So I respect the Gobert pick there. Josh Giddey, Jared Allen, Jakob Poeltl go off the board. Seeing quite a few big men, starting with Claxton in the beginning of round 5. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 big men going off the board and just a little bit over the course of a round. Big men are a premium here. You start 2 centers in this league, so got to make sure you got 2 center eligible guys. And again, I'll harp on the importance of trying to find some dual eligibility big men, and we were able to do that with Anthony Davis to start this draft. All right, so I think we're going to be looking for a guard here. You start 2 centers, 4 forwards, 4 guards, and 2 flexes. Only 4 reserve spots. So fab is always really interesting. It is a fab system. A lot of fun. I mean, it's blind, of course, if you've ever played in a fab league, and you kind of have to do a lot of guessing. Take some time to figure out how to play that. And those first few weeks are always crazy. But with only 4 reserve spots, no IR, there's plenty of roster adjustments that happen week to week. All right, so we are 4 picks away, including mine. OG Anunoby, Zion Williamson, Tyler Hero, I think might be a consideration here. I like him. I think he, in a roundabout way, kind of benefits from not being traded. It feels like everybody's kind of down on him, and I feel like his name kind of got dragged through the mud as like this. Oh, he's not quite good enough, to trade for Damian Lillard, but. To me, that was more of a situation where the Blazers just happened to have a bunch of young guards. If they had a bunch of young wings or a bunch of young big men, I think they would have happily taken Tyler Hero, but it just didn't really make sense for their construction. We're looking at CJ McCollum as well. I always feel like I take CJ McCollum in like every draft. but he's super solid. Went through a rough patch last season, but was able to bounce back and close the season really strong. Kind of finish where he always does. Zion Williamson goes there. Let's see. Yeah, let's go McCollum. I like that. Low upside, in some ways, but also really, really high floor. And you kind of forget he is the point guard in New Orleans, and I think Zion takes some of that away, assuming he's on the court. I think they'll want the ball in his hands, but I also think he could play 28 games, or at best 60, 65, which would be fantastic. Hero goes with the next pick. No surprise there. Backing up a little bit, we saw Jalen Williams. Would have put in heavy consideration for Jalen Williams had he been there at that point at my pick. But the only thing with him, it's like I love the player, like probably my favorite young player in the league, but he's almost a victim of how much young talent OKC has, where it's like obviously SGA is going to get his, Chet Holmgren's going to have a lot to say in that offense, Josh Giddey as well. Like there are a lot of nights where Jalen Williams could end up being semi-marginalized as the fourth option. And I still think he has a really nice floor. The percentages as a rookie were really, really encouraging. You don't see a ton of, rookies, especially small school guys who are relatively unheralded, come in. And, it's not like he shot the lights out from three. Like he shot 35% from three, still 52% from the field, which is wild. 81% at the line. You'll take that. Low turnover player. Turnovers don't count in this league, but you like that. And then 1.4 steals as a rookie as well. So a lot to like about Jalen Williams. Talked about Zion. CJ McCollum was my pick. Tyler Hero, and then Mark Williams. Decent value at this point for Mark Williams. I think I'm a little bit lower on him than consensus. I liked him at Duke quite a bit. It felt like he looked bigger to be at Duke, maybe just, the college game to the NBA. But he was just such a monster at the college level, and he was fine last year. But I think I kind of want to see it again before I'm investing in him, in the first 6 rounds of a draft. It took him a while to even get up to speed. I still think PJ Washington, plays a decent amount of minutes at center for that team. Like they didn't really unleash Mark Williams until after the All-Star break. And even then there were a lot of nights where he was in the low 20s. He was dealing with foul trouble. He's a good shot blocker. To me, he's not a great shot blocker. It didn't really have like the wow type of stat lines that we saw, it felt like so often from Walker Kessler last season. It's like, he was giving you 1-2 blocks most nights, which is totally fine. But I, also ended the season on a string of like, it was like 10 of his last 12 games. He had 1 or 0 blocks, which, if you're paying a relatively decent price for him, I think you want some of those more, eye-popping stat lines. So I'm not really somebody I was targeting coming into this. John Collins goes with the final pick at 72 overall in round 6. I had high hopes for John Collins this season. I still do, for the record. I think he just needed to get out of Atlanta. That was something that, in the fantasy community, we've been begging for that, over the last few seasons. And I think Utah's a decent spot, but kind of a weird landing spot at the same time. To me, he's more of a 4. I know they've kind of tried to get him to play the 3. The shooting is come and gone. The shot blocking numbers have really fallen off over the last couple of years. I hope Utah's the bounce back spot for him, but it does not look great so far in the preseason. Spencer Dinwiddie to begin round 7. Kind of an eye of the beholder type of pick with Dinwiddie. Could be an assist monster. Should be playing a ton of minutes. Also somebody who could be traded yet again at some point if the Nets, kind of alter their path. But you look at the last 15 games last season for Dinwiddie, 16 points, 11 assists. I mean, he was right there, basically leading the league in that category over the final month. Field goal percentage, free throws. That's going to be the drawback with Dinwiddie. Cam Johnson. Okay. So we're up in 2 picks here. Picking from the 9 slot if you're just tuning in. I'm looking at Tyus Jones. If he's available, I think we may go in that direction. Let's see. We're easing into Ja Morant territory as well. I don't know if I want to be the one to take that chance. You look at the last 36 hours, so 11 drafts on the NFBKC. Ja Morant's ADP comes in at 82.5. So we're not quite to that range yet. I don't think I'll take him here, and I would guess that he'll probably go either after me in round 7 or before we get around to round 8. The thing with Ja, it's like, you're lopping off just such a huge percentage, basically 30% of the season already for a guy who's also missed time due to injuries over the last couple of years. So, I mean, his best case scenario is 57 games. And, I don't see him playing all 57, frankly. I think we could very much, very easily be looking at like a 45 game season for him. So not really something that I want to be a part of. Let's see. Tyus Jones. I kind of would consider Buddy Hield here as well. Yeah, it's a little bit early for him. Let's see. This is tough. Not a ton of value. I mean, Jeremy Grant is kind of one of my favorite guys as well. I feel like we've kind of taken some players who profile similarly to him already, but let's see. Yeah, I think we will go Jeremy Grant. I think that's the best value on the board. We'll take it. Yeah, Portland's going to be interesting for a number of reasons. Simons is certainly my favorite from a fantasy perspective. I think I kind of wish we had gotten to see more of him. Down the stretch, obviously they really pulled back. They were throwing out some preposterous lineups toward the end of the year, so we didn't get like a huge sample of him, playing without Dame. But I think this could pretty easily, be a 25 point per game season for Simons. He's not a good rebounder, but not super concerned about that for a guard. Like to see the assists, tick up closer to 4.5, 5. I don't know if that'll happen with Scoot Henderson, presumably doing most of the ball handling. Not a high steals player either. Field goal percentage is pretty good for a guy who takes like 10 threes a game. He's basically shot like 40% on aggregate over the last 3 years. Very, very good free throw shooter as well. Not super high volume, takes a lot of threes. So only took 3 free throws per game last season, but he's been, 89% each of the last 2 years. On Jeremy Grant, another, kind of bad team, good stats guy. I stockpiled a few of those already. And, we kind of saw it with Detroit, a few years ago where they brought him in to kind of be the man and, put up 22, 5 rebounds, almost 3 assists per game. He's usually hovering around 1 block, actually hits a bunch of threes, more than you would think for a player of his ilk. 2.3 threes per game last year. Field goal percentage was up close to 50%, 47.5, and a pretty good free throw shooter. He was actually a terrible free throw shooter to begin his career, but he's improved virtually every year. I mean, he was, sub 60% as a rookie, kind of moved into the 60s for a couple of years and the 70s, and he's been north of 80 each of the last 3 seasons. So I think there is plenty of production to go around there when it comes to Jeremy Grant. So again, to recap, if you're just tuning in, I'm picking from the 9 slot. And we have Anthony Davis, LaMelo Ball, Lauri Markkanen, Pascal Siakam, Walker Kessler, CJ McCollum, and Jeremy Grant. So after Grant, Kyle Kuzma. Speaking of good stats, bad team. Daniel Gafford, somebody I would not have minded grabbing if he was still available coming back. Obviously, that was unlikely, but I think he's going to be a blocks monster. He's somebody who stayed relatively healthy. He's never played that many minutes, right? And I think he's finally in the right situation to do that. Even last year when he started half of the season, didn't play a ton of minutes. It's kind of a Mark Williams-y type of thing. You look at his last 30 games, he averaged 25.2 minutes per game, 1.3 blocks. That feels low to me. I mean, he is somebody that, will occasionally give you those 3, 4, 5 block games. And I think he's going to have a ton of opportunity, especially early on for the Wizards. And the other thing with Gafford, and I think, a really nice value pick in the 7th tier, it's like, who's competing with him for minutes, right? Like you can make the case with like Tyus Jones that, DeLon Wright's been a solid point guard, always somebody to try to grab if you need steals. Jordan Poole is going to be on the ball. Like they brought in Landry Shamet, Corey Kispert, Johnny Davis. They might want to get looks at those guys at some point. But with Gafford, it's Mike Muscala, and then it's basically like G Leaguers or two-way guys behind him. I don't think you're playing Denny Avdia a ton at the 5. There's just really nobody there. So I think as long as he stays healthy, he's going to be a high-minute guy by default. Devin Vassell, Jonas Valanciunas, there goes Tyus Jones, Terry Rozier, and finally we get John Morant with the 83rd overall pick. So that is almost exactly where his ADP has been over the last couple of days in the NFBKC. Again, you can check that out. They have a good ADP page that allows you to isolate certain dates to see where players are going and kind of try to gauge the market. Buddy Hield off the board. He's had a rough preseason coming off the bench. That's a concern for some. I would love to roster Buddy Hield in this league. If he was, I can assure you, if he was on the board coming back around, I would take him. Nobody has played more games than Buddy Hield since he entered the league in 2016-17. I think he's played like 23 more than the next highest, which is crazy. He's second in total made threes since entering the league, behind only Steph Curry. And there's a bigger gap there, but it's not as big as you think. I mean, Buddy Hield has just played so many more games than Steph that it's actually relatively comparable. I do think he gets traded at some point. That the writing seems to be on the wall there, but I don't know that it would really affect him, especially if he's going to be coming off the bench. Like the chances that he gets to a worse situation seem pretty low. I think just about every team would love to have Buddy Hield on its roster. Jabari Smith to begin round 8. Like Jabari Smith, disappointing as a rookie. I mean, it was really, really bad to begin the year, and I think we had some concerns about where things were headed with him, but got incrementally better as the season went along. Looked fantastic in summer league, and I think that was something that turned some heads. It's looked pretty good in the preseason as well. Had 22 and 9 against New Orleans a couple of weeks ago. Had 20 against the Spurs in their final preseason game. So I'm in on Jabari Smith. Didn't really consider taking him over Jeremy Grant necessarily. In the mid rounds, I kind of like to lock in some more reliable production, especially when you're starting with Anthony Davis, who is as big of an injury liability as it gets. All right, Scoot Henderson off the board, 86 overall. If we look at the last couple of days, he's been going about 83rd, 84th, so that's right in line. I'm starting to come around on Scoot a little bit more. Like in general, I tend to avoid rookie point guards. There's just not a long track record of guys like that succeeding in fantasy in year one. But I really like Scoot. I think he's going to play a ton of minutes. They're going to put the ball in his hands a bunch. And you talk about somebody who's looked good in preseason. I think he has certainly passed the eye test. Yeah, comment about Buddy Hield. I agree. You're saying, if anybody trades for him, it'll be a contender and they'll start him. I would think so. Yeah, I mean, so many teams would be in the market and probably already are calling the Indiana Pacers once they didn't come to terms on an extension. I think that's one of those deals that it feels like will just like come out of nowhere some random Tuesday morning. We'll get the Woj or the Shams alert that's happening. But I think there'll be like kind of a surprising bidding war because what team can't use one of the best, most reliable, high volume 3-point shooters in the NBA, and yeah, I think most teams would be willing to start him. I mean, you can start him at the 2, you can start him at the 3. Depending on your alignment, you could even kind of roll him out there in a small ball look. But yeah, I think there'll be plenty of teams calling on him, no question. Jalen Duren comes off the board. Shout out to our guy Shannon McEwen. Like Jalen Duren a lot. Another guy who passed the eye test as a rookie. The rebounding is really what you're chasing there. Not somebody who really gives you a ton in terms of passing. Although he was over 1 assist. He cleared the Hassan Whiteside Mendoza line in terms of assists. Under a block per game last year and 25 minutes per game. That's not ideal, but I think we expect that to rise. Not a good free throw shooter, and of course doesn't really give you anything from 3. Tobias Harris. There we go. As reliable as it gets. You're going to have some interesting decisions to make here coming up. Chris Middleton is still on the board. I don't know if I love his outlook this year. Austin Reeves would have to be a consideration. Wouldn't mind getting another center eligible player as well if and when Anthony Davis goes down. Yeah, maybe Wendell Carter, maybe Keegan Murray. I don't know. D'Angelo Russell, okay. Yeah, D'Angelo Russell, I mean, everybody's kind of out on him after the playoffs last year, and I get it. I'm kind of a Lakers adjacent fan to some degree, so I was, a little bit frustrated with what we saw there, but makes sense. Makes sense at this spot. Still going to play a pretty big role for this team, and I think there's also a fairly reasonable chance that he ends up being dealt midseason to what could be a better situation. Could be a lateral move. I don't think it would be worse. But should open the year as a starting point guard for the Lakers. But going to be the fourth option on most nights. All right, there goes Keegan Murray. So that takes one option off the board for us here. Man, normally this would just be kind of a no-brainer Chris Middleton pick, but I don't know how many games he's going to play. Do we go Reeves? Do we maybe consider, Andrew Wiggins? Yeah, let's see. I mean, I actually kind of like PJ Washington as well. He is forward and center eligible. Let's see. I think we are going to go Jalen Green. The shot selection has very much worried me. I think we're gonna go Andrew Wiggins. I think this is going to be an okay value here. We're still a little bit light on guard, however. Yeah, we'll go Wiggins. Last year had the kind of weird situation where he was just away from the team forever, and we just got no update after no update. But he's been somebody who traditionally has played a ton of games throughout his career. Still think of him as kind of a disappointment relative to expectations, but prior to last season had been easily clearing 70, if not 80 games every single year, which is huge in this format. And when he was out there last year, still looked like himself. 17, 5, and 2 gives you north of a steal per game. Good field goal percentage. The free throw shooting, though, is concerning, although he doesn't really take that many. He was under 2 attempts last year, but 61%. He's never been a great free throw shooter, but he's also gotten markedly worse. He came in as 76, 77%, and has kind of trickled down into the 60s from there. So we'll hope for a bounce back from Wiggins, but just, chasing games played, chasing some counting stats there. Not an exciting pick by any means. Let's see. All right, so Reeves goes with the next pick, then Wendell Carter, then Zubac. I love Zubac. I was kind of hoping to snag him a little bit later. Another guy who plays a ton of games, just kind of gives you the classic big man stats, right? Points, low end points, rebounds, and blocks. But he's been a guy who's played 80 plus games throughout his career. He's played 70 plus, if not more than that. So like getting the reliability later in the draft. There goes Jalen Green to begin round 9. I still really like Jalen Green. Grabbed him in a league last week in one of our staff leagues. In roto formats, you're pretty concerned about the percentages. Actually lost some percentages across the board last year. It was worse in terms of field goal, free throw, and 3-point percentage. The triple crown of getting worse. I think he bounces back. I think he's the type of guy who is really going to benefit from Ime Udoka. The assists were up last season. There's kind of a ceiling there to me, though, with Van Vliet coming in. I think losing Kevin Porter is big for him in general, but I don't know that we see a notable boost in assists. Yeah, you're saying they're not trying to leave me any centers. You're right. I was kind of warned about this by Alex Barutha, but we do have 2 locked in. And Anthony Davis can slide to forward as well. Need another big man here. Need to start grabbing some guards. Gonna have a decision to make though. I'm gonna be pretty light on guard if we don't go with one here, but I'm kind of leaning toward PJ Washington. Just not sure I want to be this light on guards. That would be Marcus Smart would be another consideration. Don't exactly love the player there, but I think would be a pretty reasonable value at this point, especially early in the season. I think he's going to be tasked with a lot of responsibility. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, with Smart, it's the field goal percentage is just brutal. You'd hope that it could offset that a little bit. Not a good free throw shooter. Not terrible in that regard, but not good. Let's see. Could go Chris Paul. Not the biggest Chris Paul guy, but getting him at a pretty good price here. I do worry about games played with him. Let's see. Yeah, we'll go Marcus Smart. Need another guard. I think my heart said PJ Washington, though. I got to be honest. He's not going to make it back around, but we'll have to explore some other options there. Yeah, my hope is that Marcus Smart could get over 2 threes per game. He's done it once in his career. He's been at 1.9 in 2 of the last 3 years. With no job for the first 25 games, I think there's a pretty reasonable chance that they're going to ask him to do quite a bit more offensively. That could really go either way. It could mean that he's taking more bad shots and the field goal percentage gets even worse. I'm a little nervous about that. Again, the free throw percentage has never been a plus for him. It's never been a glaring negative. And he doesn't take enough that it really kills you one way or the other. But two kind of boring picks back to back, and Wiggins and Smart. Markel Fultz, Chris Middleton finally goes. That's a pretty good price on Middleton. I think had he been there, that would have been a consideration. Chris Paul goes off the board. And there goes Josh Hart as well, one of my favorite role players in the NBA. And start looking at the queue here and making some decisions. Seeing Christian Wood in here, I'm not doing it. I don't really understand why his ADP is as high as it is, and we're talking 118. I mean, it's not like crazy, but I just don't really think that that's going to work out. I guess the counter to that would be that they're basically bringing him in on a flyer, but I almost feel like that works against him. Right? Like there's no real obligation for him to be in the mix. This is the complete opposite situation of Dallas, where for better or for worse, they really needed Christian Wood to contribute. And he fell out of favor pretty quickly. I mean, the Lakers have so many options. It's like I think there are a lot of nights where he might be, end up being a DNP. I'm anxious to see how they use him tomorrow night. But obviously, you got Anthony Davis, you got Jared Vanderbilt, you got Rui Hachimura, Torian Prince can play the 4. LeBron obviously can play the 4. Jackson Hayes. I mean, they have pivots if they're not forced to rely on Christian Wood. And Brock Purdy threw a pick. Oh no. Paul Reed. Okay. Got some Paul Reed stands in the room here. Clint Capella, Derek White, Michael Porter Jr. Kind of an interesting fantasy case. Somebody who a couple years ago would have gone much higher. This is still a pretty good value in terms of ADP. I think we have him ranked a little bit higher on our site. Just somebody who's kind of fallen into a kind of a specialty type of role, I suppose. And we kind of already knew this would be the case. I mean, perhaps the least willing passer pound for pound in the NBA. He's just never really interested in getting more than an assist per game. It's kind of a zero on defense. You're lucky if he gets you one combined steal plus block. He's basically a 3-point and points guy at this point. And also weirdly, like not that good of a free throw shooter. There tends to be more correlation there. Like if you're somebody who's like a career 40-some% shooter from 3 and your jumper looks as great as it does, he's somebody who's been hovering closer to 80% at the line and doesn't take a ton, so not a huge effect, but I think intuitively you would think he'd be 85% plus. He's also lost a little bit as a rebounder the last couple of years. Was closer to 8 or 7.5, I should say, boards per game a couple of years ago. That dropped in his 9-game season 2 years ago, and then was down to 5.5 last year. Just doing a lot of hanging out on the perimeter, as one does. Shaden Sharp, I like it. I think I like him more in real life than in fantasy right now. Just kind of somebody who's like the highs are really high. The lows still look pretty low to me on a lot of nights, but just ridiculous athlete. The Blazers are going to be a wildly fun team to watch. I think Portland, Houston, OKC, those are going to be the league pass teams this season. Obviously with Sharp, you're hinging on what he did at the end of the year. Those last 10 games, 24, 6, and 4. Maintain the percentages too. 46% from the field, despite being by far the number one option. Having to take a lot of difficult shots. I thought he looked great. I I don't think that's a realistic projection, right? I mean, there was no Grant, no Lillard, no Simons at that point, and I think he's going to fall back a little bit. All right, so we're getting close here. Looking at Mitchell Robinson, I don't think he'll make it. Certainly not taking Christian Wood. Bobby Portis, I don't love him in roto leagues, but he is center and forward eligible. And there goes Christian Wood. Best of luck. Brandon Miller, I don't think I'm really going to touch him this year. Not the biggest fan. I actually think he's going to be a good player, but guys like him just do not profile as good fantasy players right away. And kind of a weird logjam situation for a team that's as bad as Charlotte is. They have a lot of guys competing for minutes, although we'll see what happens with Miles Bridges. Not going to speak too much about that, but if he were to be away from the team, I think that would obviously benefit Miller. Anthony Melton, he was in the queue. That's a good pick. Let's see. We are getting down there now. This is like a fun part of the draft. If you're an NBA junkie, no question, but you're just like never, whoever you're taking at 117 overall, you're never just like, hell yeah, let's go. Got my guy. You're always never going to feel great about it. Russell Westbrook is still out there, by the way. We are coming up on, by the end of this round, it'll be pick 120. His ADP is 121. Trey Jones is still out there. I don't mind Trey Jones. I think the Sohan news obviously has kind of thrown things for a loop to some degree. His ADP over the last couple of days is closer to 115, whereas you'll see it on aggregate at like 105 in the draft room. There goes Sohan. There goes Russell Westbrook. Just not a Russ guy. I can't do it. All right, so team 8 here. I think they're going to take Mitchell Robinson. That's my guess. Draymond, of course, on the board as well. He will not play on opening night. All right, Trey Jones goes. So we're in business here. We got some options. I'm going to go Mitchell Robinson. Lock in another center eligible player. At this point, there just aren't a ton of guys, that have that dual eligibility. I'm still looking at Bobby Portis at this point. I feel like there's just, Portis kind of gives me some overlap with a lot of things that we already have. So with Robinson, free throw percentage, very dicey, but doesn't take very many. We're looking for the rebounds, and of course, you're looking for the blocks with Mitchell Robinson. Let's see. Do some last minute research here. Yeah, man, he takes. All right, we're doing it. Mitchell Robinson. All right, so that gives us 3 center eligible players. That's big. I've been in situations in these leagues before. I've been somebody who's rostered Anthony Davis, which when the going is good, it's really good. When it's bad, it's really bad. And you just don't want to be in a situation where you're always going to, if you're doing things right, you're going to come out with at least another center eligible player to pivot to, but you don't really want to get into like the 130s and 140s. And then Anthony Davis goes down for 3 weeks, and all of a sudden you're starting somebody that you just don't really feel comfortable starting. That could be a Naz Reid, that could be a Isaiah Stewart. Guys who have some upside, but there's been times where I've had to leave the objectively better player on the bench just because they don't fit the positional alignment. So trying to be a little more cognizant of that this time around. But we have Anthony Davis, Walker Kessler, and Mitchell Robinson all center eligible. We'll grab at least one more before the end of the draft, but got to make up some ground here in terms of guards. Felt really good about the start with Davis and LaMelo Ball, the 2 guys to me that could end up finishing as like best case top 8-9 values. Which when the first of those came off the board at 9, you feel pretty good about that. I went with some safer options after that. Lauri Markkanen, Pascal Siakam. I think both of those guys really high floor, play a ton of games, contribute in a bunch of well-rounded categories, targeting blocks and field goal percentage for the most part, and some rebounds with Walker Kessler in round 5. And then we went into boring mode. McCollum, Grant, Wiggins, Smart. Those are just kind of old reliable type of players who I've banked on plenty of times in my fantasy basketball career. All right. So Jaden McDaniels goes. Just got the extension. Good for him. Still just wild seeing some of these salary figures, as Saquon Barkley is like doing everything he can to try to get $30 million. Jaden McDaniels signs a $136 million contract, fully guaranteed. I like Jaden McDaniels. I think he's kind of like Terrence Manny to me a little bit, where like everybody talks about him, a little bit better than the production has actually been. And I think he's better in real life than he is in fantasy. A lot of what he does on the defensive end, like, players will tell you, coaches, GMs will say he's one of the best defenders in the league. And I'm not saying I don't buy that, but it doesn't really translate to like high end fantasy value. Last year he averaged over 30 minutes a game, played 79 games, which is huge. But one block, under a steal per game, doesn't really generate assists, doesn't really rebound. So I think he's more of a, like, in theory type of player at this point, but he's only 23 and he's going into year 4. So maybe this is the year he breaks out. Okay. Got another decision coming up here. Got some options. So I want to go guard. At this point in the draft, it's not really a mandate at this point, but want to get another guard that we feel good about. I'm looking at Kevin Huerter. I don't really love Kevin Huerter. I don't think there's a ton of upside there necessarily, but another safe player. He'd certainly fit the mandate at this point. Got off to a really hot start last year, but kind of a threes guy. Looked like he was going to be more of a passer during his Atlanta days, but those numbers have gone down. Emmanuel Quickley is interesting to me. I do like the free throw percentage boost, and we might need that, although he was a little bit lower last year. Let's see. Gary Trent would be the other consideration, but I kind of soured on him a little bit. Could go Schroeder. Could go Dennis Schroeder. I'm going to go quickly. 81 games last year, 78 the year before. Pretty good track record there. I think he's a player that has kind of been a little bit limited by the guys around him. Not in a bad way necessarily, but when you're playing with Barrett and you're playing with, I'm totally about Jalen Brunson, obviously. It's just going to kind of cap his upside. But I think considering that he's a bench player and is a little bit limited in that way, like to still get to 3.5 assists, really good rebounder for his size. Like he's not a big guy by any means, but 4.2 boards per game last year, over a steal per game. That was nice. The 3-point shooting continues to improve, should be hopefully over 6 attempts per game this season. And, if he can get back to being 88, 89% at the line, like he was his first 2 years, that'll be big as well. So to recap, once again, if you're just joining, we got Anthony Davis, LaMelo Ball, Lauri Markkanen, Pascal Siakam, Walker Kessler, CJ McCollum, Jeremy Grant, Andrew Wiggins, Marcus Smart, Mitchell Robinson, and Emmanuel Quickley. Try to highlight that. Okay. Bobby Portis comes off the board. Bobby Portis is another player, and you see a lot of these guys, as we start to get into kind of the role players of the NBA. I think he's a better player in real life than he is in fantasy. The free throw percentage has never been great. Again, not somebody who takes a ton. A couple of years ago, he shot like 47% from 3, which, all well and good. Kind of knew that was not going to be realistic. He's dropped down quite a bit. I mean, he was like 11 percentage points lower than that last year. Still a good 3-point shooter, for his position, for his size, for a guy who really was not a 3-point shooter at all coming into the league. But, for being a big man, doesn't really give you anything on defense. I mean, 0.6 steals plus blocks last year. That's terrible. Not really somebody who generates assists. So, with Portis, you're pretty much just in it for points, rebounds, field goal percentage, and a couple threes. With that said, though, I am a Bucks fan. I'm here in Milwaukee. I would like things to go well for the Milwaukee Bucks, but to me, like the Dame stuff, whether he falls off at all as he gets older, like I'm not really that worried about that. I am worried about Brook Lopez, making it through this season. He had back surgery 2 years ago, and he's going to be 30. Well, he's going to turn 36 before the end of the regular season. It's just dicey to me. 78 games last year, like that was best case scenario. I don't know that could be counted on again. I'm not saying he's going to go down with some sort of catastrophic injury, but last year pretty much went as well as it could for him. Bounced back in a huge way in terms of blocks. So I totally get the appeal with Lopez, but that's one where I'm just kind of not trying to be too optimistic, as he moves into his age 35 season. Hunt down some more values here. Derek Lively's out there. Still a little early to take him. I get it. I feel like he's somebody I'm seeing, come off the board a little bit earlier than he should. Energy players look good in the preseason. Should play a lot of minutes by default, which is nice, but didn't really love what I saw from him at Duke last year. Robert Williams, that's just a total toss-up to me. I have no idea how he's going to be used in Portland. I think he probably gets rerouted at some point, which might be a good thing for him. Now kind of behind DeAndre Ayton. But just, kind of a weird developmental arc for Robert Williams early in his career. Herb Jones, like that, getting the steals upside. Mike Conley, Obi Toppin, Sadiq Bey, DeAndre Hunter. Been through the DeAndre Hunter thing way too many times. I feel like I've had him in this format like 6 times already, and it just has never gone well. Oh, Vikings just missed a field goal. There we go. RJ Barrett, my man. I love the player, really for no reason at all. It's almost become a bit at this point. Not a good fantasy player at all. Somebody who's better in real life. And I just kind of staked out my claim on RJ Barrett Island early in his career. And I still think he's a good player, but yeah, he's kind of been the exact same guy for the last 3 years. That's been a little bit disappointing, but still only 23 years old. We're holding out hope. There goes Brandon Miller, Dennis Schroeder. Would have taken Schroeder if he was on the board, for the record. I want that on the record. There goes Xavier Tillman. Obviously, he'll be stepping in for Steven Adams, so don't be alarmed. Okay. Still looking for a little more guard help here. We're kind of forward heavy still. LaMelo, McCollum, Smart, quickly. I've got to get some depth there. Oh, Trey Murphy, that was a target. Pick is coming up here. I do tend to lean veterans in this situation, rather than, kind of chancing it on a rookie or making an upside pick. A little bit later, we'll start taking some shots, but I try to play it a little bit safer when we're talking about guys that, in theory are going to be in your starting lineup a lot of weeks. All right, so Kevon Looney, Jordan Clarkson go off the board. Man, this is interesting. So I'm looking at Gary Trent and I'm looking at Kevin Huerter. Norman Powell could work his way into the mix as well. We'll probably wait on him. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, Trent is so tough. The field goal percentage has been so shaky. Yeah, you're just looking at, I mean, he's a high steals player. Field goal percentage was actually okay last year. You know what? Let's do it. Gary Trent. Another pet player of mine. I feel like I take him in way, way, way too many leagues. I had just a preposterous amount of Gary Trent exposure last season, and things were rolling along pretty good. I mean, he actually started off strong, had a great first few weeks to the season. First like 15 games, he was at 17 points a game. The steals were there. The threes were going down, and went through kind of a stretch where he missed a handful of games in December, and then had a really nice run, starting in early December, where he was in the starting lineup every night. That's when Nick Nurse was just kind of going off and just doing whatever night to night. I mean, he had a 24-game run from late December through mid-February, where he averaged 21 a game, 1.8 steals, 3 threes, shot 40% from three, 89% at the line on almost 4 attempts per game. So we're chasing that a little bit. And, Toronto, they no longer have the kind of built-in fantasy benefit of Nick Nurse, like running his starters into the ground every single night. So we'll see what changes there. But I also think this team is as shallow as it's been in a long time. Schroeder, OG, Barnes, Siakam, Pirtle, that's a pretty solid 5. But, Grady Dick, we'll see what he could be as a rookie. Not really somebody I'm interested in fantasy, but I think Gary Trent's going to still play a ton of minutes for this team. Maybe even, I wouldn't say run point, but, kind of be the nominal point guard at times, because they just have no depth there. Obviously Scotty Barnes will handle the ball quite a bit, but, Malachi Flynn, somebody who it feels like they've bent over backwards to not really play over the last few years. Like he's going to play this year, but I'm still a little bit hesitant to buy in there. And, with Trent, he's somebody who could be moved, and, not nearly as much upside, of course, as Buddy Hield. But I think if he were to be moved, he would be, in probably a better basketball situation and wouldn't lose a ton of value. Kobe White, okay. All right, Herder goes off the board. That would have been a consideration there. Let's see. So we got 4 more picks here. I don't love any players on the board right now. I mean, is Malcolm Brogdon a value at this point? I don't even know. I have no idea what's going to happen with him. I think he's going to start the season in that rotation, but that feels pretty dicey. Colin Sexton, maybe. I'm holding out some hope there. That could kind of go either way. Yeah, let's do it. Colin Sexton. We're at the point where the player pool is looking pretty bleak. Al Horford is top 5 in terms of remaining ADP. Will not be touching that. I think just too late in his career. Wouldn't mind taking a shot on like Amen Thompson. I think I actually prefer Asar Thompson. If we're talking redraft, he's already off the board, of course. Just better situation. I think those guys, they are twins, as you may know, very similar skill sets. But I think Asar is going to be in a better spot for fantasy this year. All right, so we succeeded in loading up on some guards. We can kind of go wherever we want with these last few picks. We will probably try to diversify, maybe grab 1 guard, 1 forward, 1 center. But we've done a pretty good job of not putting ourselves in a major hole there. You look at some of these other teams. Team 2, for example, you got 2 great centers in Embiid and Wembanyama, probably going to be okay. But if one of those guys were to go down. I think Porzingis is actually center eligible, as is Randall, so they're in good shape there. Let's see, is Chet Holmgren center eligible? He's got to be. No, he's forward eligible. Okay, so that's interesting. Yeah, team 1, that's kind of a good example of assuming this is accurate on the ADP page, showing Holmgren as forward only. That's a spot where if Gobert were to get hurt, I wouldn't even say that with Jokic because he never gets hurt. But if either of those guys were to go down, all of a sudden you're in a situation where, as of right now, you don't have another center eligible player on that roster, and you can kind of get left out to dry. Well, there goes Al Horford. I get it. I suppose he's been solid into his late 30s, but just feels like with Porzingis coming in, Even if I don't think Porzingis is going to stay healthy because he's really never done that. I feel like this is the year where things could start to fall off for Horford. He's going to be 30. Well, he's already 37. He's going to be 38 by the time the finals roll around. Numbers wise, he was still averaging a block a game as a 36-year-old, which is pretty nuts. So credit to him for that. I mean, I just felt like, if you're watching the playoffs, which if you're watching this, I assume you were, he basically turned into a spot up shooter, right? I mean, he was Kevin Love and was just kind of hanging out on the perimeter, still vulturing some blocks here and there, but even the rebounding started to go, and it just kind of felt like, if you were playing the player prop market in the playoffs, his points prop was like 7.5 every night, and you basically needed him to hit at least 2 threes and then like get a putback layup because that was pretty much all he was subsisting on. Kelly Oubre, best looking man in the league, goes off the board to conclude round 13. Back-to-back Kellys, Kelly Olynyk to begin round 14. I was hoping to grab him. I know Alex Barutha shared with me that he grabbed Olynyk with his second to last pick. So based on that, I was kind of hoping he would slide a little bit and we'd be able to grab him as part of the end game. Let's see. Yeah, Max Strus is out there if we want to target some threes. I do love Malik Monk. This dates all the way back to Kentucky. It might be something I just need to, kind of consider mentally if this is actually a good idea. But I think he's a really good player. I think Sacramento still pretty shallow. They made some additions on the edges this offseason. I think they'll still be a very good team. I think it helps that they are one of the few teams that actually cares about the regular season. I think they're going to go hard. I think they're going to push to try to win 50 games if they can. The big addition really is Vezenkov up front coming over from Europe. And then, Chris Duarte is really the only other notable change on that roster. All right, so there goes Dylan Brooks. There goes Amen Thompson. Not a Dylan Brooks guy in general. I don't know that there are a ton of those guys out there at this point. But actually, I think he's going to be a decent value for fantasy. To look up where he finished the last few years, but I think he's someone whose reputation in some ways has kind of hurt him in fantasy. He's kind of been all over the map in terms of injuries, but for the most part is, if you throw out 21, 22 when he missed a bunch of time, he has some 70 games, some high 60 game seasons as well. Finished inside the top 100 once in his career. It's been close a couple other times. Drew Eubanks. Wow. All right. Matisse Thybulle looking for some steals and blocks there. We like that. Quentin Grimes is somebody to potentially look at. Maybe he can take a step forward. There's been some Talen Horton-Tucker buzz. I don't know if I can buy in on that. I was all in like 3 years ago when he was, playing well in spurts for the Lakers, but just haven't really seen it. And I think he might be better in real life than fantasy anyway. Let's see. We're getting real deep in the player pool now. Tari Eason. Yeah, I mean, the lower you go, you're obviously going to get progressively less excited, but just not a ton catching my eye here. Malcolm Brogdon, okay. Let's see. Do we go Malik Monk? Do we go Norman Powell? Terrence Mann is still out there. Kuminga is still out there. Malik Beasley, if we're looking for some threes, I don't mind that. But I kind of have to choose one or the other, I think, in terms of whether we want, I don't know if we want to take two guards here. Isaiah Stewart, potentially. He's center eligible, of course. Monk. Man, we're taking it down to the wire here, but I think we're going to have to go with Malik Monk. All right, so we want to ideally grab a forward and a center eligible player if possible. Rashawn Holmes is out there. He's been a good fantasy player in the past. I mean, Dallas, just really tough to figure out. It looks like they want to go with Lively at the 5. They still they still have all these guys that have just been on this roster forever. Kleber, Dwight Powell, Markieff Morris is on this team for some reason. It feels like they like Grant Williams. They like Omax Prosper, the rookie out of Marquette. We'll see how much those guys play. But, Holmes might be worth a stab. I mean, we're at the point now where we can't think too hard about it. Man, these options are not inspiring. Let's see. Nick Richards, maybe. I might just take Isaiah Stewart. I mean, the minutes are going to be there. He's not a great fantasy player, but just kind of looking for some depth at this point. A potential, plug him in there for a week if you absolutely have to type of situation. I mean, James Wiseman just came off the board for crying out loud. Stewart, he's taking so many threes. It's killing his field goal percentage. But points, rebounds, kind of what you're looking for from a big man. I don't really love the upside there. All right, we're back on the clock. Kuminga goes off the board. I like that pick. Man. I think we're going to take Nick Richards here. Obviously, don't love it. You're never going to be thrilled, but forward center eligible. You got to think about that. If you get hit with injuries, you get hit with a weird week when you got a bunch of guys with 2 gamers. I want to have a little bit of flexibility there. Hopefully, we don't need it, but also somebody who, if Mark Williams were to get injured, we don't really know what his track record is yet at the NBA level in terms of health. Somebody who could be vaulted into a larger role pretty easily. And, we're in year 4 now, kind of final year of his rookie deal. And, could be a situation where Charlotte at some point decides they want to get an extended look at him. Nick Richards in the 9 games he started last year, 11 points, 10.5 boards, 1.3 blocks. Okay. Not really great, but we'll take it. Decent free throw shooter as well, by big man standards, was up close to 75% last year. There goes Isaiah Stewart. Okay, he's off the board. Let's see what we can do here. KJ Martin is interesting to me. This Clippers rotation is so tough to figure out. I like what I've seen from him, especially if you kind of prorate it to per game over the last few years. But the Clippers are just, Robert Covington still on the roster, Nick Batum still on the roster, Terrence Mann, Marcus Morris, obviously Paul George and Kawhi on the wing as well. It's just, I don't know if Kenny Martin is really going to have much of a chance. I know there's a report already that he's not going to start. I don't really think anybody thought he was going to start, but going to need an injury or two, which could certainly happen, right? I think that's that's part of the deal with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. So we'll throw him in the queue. That could be an option. Larry Nance has always kind of been a pet player of mine. That ship may have sailed on that one. Royce O'Neal, maybe. We'll be at 189 overall. By the way, not that it really matters. Not really concerned about ADP at this point. Jarris Walker is somebody I've been keeping an eye on in Indiana. We'll see if he makes it back. I would guess most likely not. But he's had some nice games in the preseason so far. And, probably not somebody who's going to start right away. I'm also just not a huge Obi Toppin guy. I think, Jarris Walker could take that over at some point. Bilal Coulibaly. I don't think we're going to take him. I feel pretty confident. Yeah, I had someone ask earlier about, whether or not I'm punting assists. I'm not a big punter in general. Try not to. But I certainly wouldn't want to punt assists because LaMelo Ball was my second round pick. But obviously it gives you other things outside of that. But yeah, we followed it up with Markkanen, who's not really a passer. Same with AD in round one. Kessler. So really, we kind of have like 1.5 assist guys through the first 5 rounds. Not ideal. Especially when you look at Team Seven, for example. Curry, Irving, Butler, DeRozan, Şengün. All those guys can pass. All those guys will put up good assist numbers. Same with Team Six for the most part, minus Aiton. Um, yeah, I think most teams are going to be better off, especially at the top in terms of assists. Garland and Brunson here is a nice combination. Booker's going to give you some assists. I think he'll play a lot of point guard this year. Excuse me. So yeah, Maxey, Wagner, same story. This team might struggle in terms of assists as well. So I don't think we'll be at the bottom. I think LaMelo gives you a decent enough floor, and Siakam plus McCollum. I expect to get some assists out of Marcus Smart as well, but that will not be a category of strength. I think we can say that pretty confidently. Outside of that, though, I think we've done a decent job, building a balanced team. I think if Anthony Davis stays healthy, that's the biggest if. If Davis plays 48 games, then we're probably cooked, and we're going to be in trouble here. But like the blocks upside that we have between Davis, Kessler, Mitchell Robinson. Those are all guys that I think should help us out there. Jeremy Grant could give us some blocks. Not going to get a ton from most of these other guys, but those are three big ones. I mean, Davis and Kessler could be both in the top 3 or 4 in terms of total blocks on the year. 3-pointers, I think we'll be in okay shape there. Again, probably not a category that's going to be a glaring strength, but did what we could later in the draft to shore that one up. I think we'll get, for better or for worse, more attempts out of Marcus Smart this year. Quickly as a 3-point shooter, Gary Trent, Malik Monk, those guys will hopefully give us a little bit of a floor there. I mean, that's kind of the rub. When you take Davis and Kessler with 2 of your first 5 picks, we'll see on Davis. I think the idea is that he'll shoot more threes. I don't, kind of want to see it before I believe that. But someone like Kessler is just kind of a total zero there. I'm trying to look and see, if there's one team, especially at the top, that really stands out to me. And I think this is going to be a competitive league, no question. I think if Kyrie stays healthy, I like this start here. And you can say the same thing about Curry at this point. He's missed so much time over the last few years, and if he was there at 9, I would still take him. I don't. Durant is kind of the guy that I backed off of a little more. Just he's up there in age. He's bigger. He's had the more severe injury, with the torn Achilles, and it feels like that's kind of thrown some things off for him. But and I'm sitting here as somebody who took Anthony Davis, so I don't have a whole lot to say in terms of injury risk. This is an interesting one for sure. I mean, Paul George is sneakily missed more time over the last few years than Kawhi Leonard, so some risk there. But I like Jaren Jackson, for sure. I was actually hoping that he would make it back to me in round 2. Bit of a pipe dream, but overall pretty happy with the start of this draft. I felt like after Grant and Wiggins is where I didn't find quite as much value as I wanted, but at least made up some ground in terms of getting some guards. We took 4 straight guards at one point. Want to get one more forward here to conclude this thing. Trying to deduce if we might need some more threes, so that's going to influence this last pick. And if we don't go forward, Malik Beasley is somebody that I'm intrigued by, and I promise it's not because I'm a Bucks fan, but I do think you kind of forget, like, he was so bad and just kind of lost his confidence at the end of last year with the Lakers, but has had some really nice years in the past. I mean, he had almost a 20-point per game season a few years ago. All right, so I don't want to go Terrence Mann. Royce O'Neal's boring. I think we're narrowing it down to Jarris Walker or Malik Beasley. Let's see. Yeah, Tim Hardaway's on the board. Don't really love the fantasy profile there. Just trying to do one last scan and make sure we're not missing anybody who might be buried in the player pool. But NFBKC does a pretty good job, and it's such a sharp room that if there's somebody buried, they'll move up pretty quickly in terms of the average ADP. Let's see. We'll go Malik Beasley. We'll see if we got 3 more picks here, and if Jarris Walker is sitting in the player pool, that might be somebody that we have to consider adding once we get a little bit more of a sample under our belt, which we will have in less than 24 hours. Very much looking forward to opening night. You probably can't hear it in my voice. I've done a lot of talking today on radio and podcasts and things like that. It's 10:30 local time for me here in Milwaukee, but really pumped for Lakers Nuggets tomorrow. Really pumped for Suns Warriors. Bucks don't play till Thursday, but I'm always almost more excited. Like the big marquee games are fun, but if you're really into this stuff, it's like it's the Wednesday night when you got 12 games. Like I am so intrigued to watch like Kings Jazz or Pelicans Grizzlies, Blazers Clippers. Like those are the games that I'm almost more excited about. All right, so we went Malik Beasley. Jalen Suggs goes off the board. Totally fine taking a chance there. Kind of surprised he lasted this long. He was a player that I loved coming out of Gonzaga, and has been injured and just hasn't looked all that good so far. We did see Miles Bridges go, second pick into round 2. Still just a kind of a weird situation. Shouldn't say weird. Troubling is probably the better word. But weird in that we haven't really been given much of an indication from the Charlotte Hornets. So he'll be suspended to begin the year and kind of unclear from there. But I don't really have an issue, grabbing him. Obviously, there are some people that might take a moral stance against that. But if you're getting him in the last round of a draft like this, and it may not be the right thing for the Hornets to do, but if he's back with this team, that's going to end up looking like a good value. We finished out with Larry Nance. And of course, Chris Boucher had to come off the board. There's always a Chris Boucher believer out there, and he's had his moments, no question. But already in his age 30 season, like he's somebody that has perpetually been like 23 years old in my mind. But I guess in theory, the path to playing time might be there in Toronto. All right, well, it is late, but we appreciate everybody stopping in. Everybody who checked us out on Twitter. Please subscribe in particular to the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball channel on YouTube. Our guy Alan Soslowski has done a great job, helping us build that out. We launched it only like 3 weeks ago. It's been really encouraging so far. We appreciate all the feedback, all the views, all the likes and the comments you guys have been leaving. And we'll be continuing to build that out throughout the season. We'll have 5 podcasts per week. Those will all be live streamed on Twitter and on the YouTube channel. They'll be archived over there. You can find them wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll be doing a lot of standalone video content as well. So thanks for everybody who followed along, and hopefully this season goes well.